That way the students will have a context. So shoot for it.
All right. So I just said that because I had this deadline, I basically stopped meditating regularly for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and not completely, but a lot of it was a lot less regular. And I mentioned that yeah, my practice got considerably worse in the sense that my sits, when I came back to it, where my focus was a lot worse than it had been previously. Um, and I just mentioned that, yeah, it was good. It was instructive because it first of all told me how short-lived some of those benefits were, and that you have to maintain it to keep that degree of focus and calm in your mind. And also, it was useful because it made clear that the benefits that I've seen since I started meditating were actually as a result of the meditating itself. So I guess
Hmm.
that's the silver lining of it, is that that was made pretty clear.
All right. Well, that in fact is, in a way, a kind of an investigation. And that the investigation that you did is what is life like without practice? And the answer is that it goes downhill.
Yeah.
And so that's further eradication of the doubt.
Yeah, I guess that's right.
Right. And so don't beat yourself up for not practicing because you noted something quite valuable and important with that.
Yeah.
And having that doubt eradicated, knowing for sure that that the sitting practice or the mental skill development is worthwhile, is beneficial.
Yeah.
And as the Buddha says, it's good in the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good in the end.
Hmm.
And that you're actually beginning to see that clearly because you recognize that things get worse when you're not sitting. And that basically, um, if you don't mind, I would like to look for a moment at the word meditation
Okay.
and what the word meditation itself means and where it came from. Back in the Middle Ages, when there was a lot of abbeys and monasteries, and people were realizing how tough it was in a feudal world, and so many people were joining the Catholic Church and devoting themselves to meditation. And so during those times, the abbeys of the abbots of the abbeys would find topics for contemplation, or for mulling over, or for thinking about. And so this is where the word meditation comes from, in the sense of meditating on an object. Now, in the Christianity, that would be like meditating on the Trinity, or meditating on the goodness of God, or other things like this. And so, from that mentality, using meditation as a word that we're using when applying what the Christians were doing to Buddhism, especially when it comes to the Four Noble Truths, that many of the students begin to believe that, oh, well, what I need to do is I need to get my mind fit for work. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to meditate, or I'm going to cogitate, or I'm going to think about the Four Noble Truths. And that is actually quite valuable, especially the Four Noble Truths. In when I use the word the Four Noble Truths, I'm actually talking about a whole book, not just four little truths that can be listed down, but rather in depth. When we talk about the Four Noble Truths, that which can be meditated on is the nature of suffering, why it happens, why humanity is so stuck in it, etc. For the second noble truth, we could meditate and cogitate on how the second noble truth, when broken down, shows us what the path is. and I'm talking about the path now, is over time. What is the Sotapan? What is the Sotagami? What's the Arahat? And that kind of stuff, because all of that stuff is clearly understood within the Second Noble Truth. And also cogitating and figuring out and meditating on the Third Noble Truth in the sense of what it's like to be free from suffering, and then thinking about and cogitating on and figuring out and picking apart the Eightfold Noble Path and all of the various aspects of that. That would be the way that a lot of people would think about meditation in the context of what we're looking at here. And I'm saying that there's nothing specifically wrong with that, but that it misses a really important quality. And that is that we're not going to be gaining much benefit from meditating on the Four Noble Truths beyond a certain, let us say, intellectual understanding. That's all meditation will do, is it'll bring us to a certain intellectual understanding. That really, that when we're developing the skills, we recognize, in fact, the four primary skills that need to be developed are the first four items of the Eightfold Path, which is also the first four items in the seven factors of enlightenment, which is sati, is to be developed, to remember. And in fact, you can't even meditate without some sati, because you have to remember that you're going to meditate on the Four Noble Truths in order to be able to even do that. But the real issue that I'm working up to is that the Four Noble Truths are not to be meditated on, or let us say that that's not the full deal, that we're not just trying to figure out the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths, but we're trying to catch the mind in action. That we apply the Four Noble Truths at that point when we can see the suffering, recognize it. That's the way that we want to look at it. That it has a whole lot to do with being here now. That you can, in fact, contemplate, cogitate, and meditate on the Four Noble Truths and not be here now, because you'll start thinking about the past or the future or whatever like that. And so that's something that needs to be done. I'm not against understanding of the Four Noble Truths, but rather that's only one of the aspects. That the second part, which is more valuable and more important than that, is the practice the Four Noble Truths. Practice the skill development. Practice the Eightfold Noble Path in the sense of recognizing, is this right view? Is this right sati? Is this right effort? Is this the right attitude? The attitude of a winner. And so we always look at it as, is it this? That's why the second sutta, the Sabha Asava Sutta, is talking about this very thing in the sense of what is worthy of our attention. And the Buddha goes through the things that are not worthy of our attention are the things that such that when we pay attention to them, things don't increase. They don't get more valuable. But things that are worthy of being paid attention to are such that wholesome things increase and unwholesome things decrease. So this is the way that we want to look at what is worthy of paying attention to. Because in fact, this whole idea of paying attention to something is the same thing that many people would think of as meditation. But the big one is that when we pay attention to that which is worth paying attention to, I'm going to pull this out because this is the Sabha Asava Sutta. Actually, paying attention is not the word that they use. The word is attending wisely. That when we don't attend wisely, things that are unwholesome will remain. But when we're attending wisely, then wholesome things increase and unwholesome things decrease. But here's the important thing. He attends wisely, this is suffering. He attends wisely, this is the reason for suffering or the origin of suffering. He attends wisely, this is the cessation of suffering. He attends wisely, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Now, what we mean by that is attending wisely is to attend wisely to what's happening right now. An example would to attend wisely to the third noble truth would then be to put oneself in the state of no suffering, to be in a state of nibbana, so that we can experience that and know what it is. Because until we understand what nibbana is through experience, we'll always have doubt about it. And that's where we got started with this, was that you were having, or let us say, the eradication of doubt because you're coming back to the practice. So as you're coming back to the practice, I want to make sure that you understand that as your practice gets back up to speed, that you're going to now be paying attention to those things that are worthy of being paid attention to. And in that regards, the Four Noble Truths is not an abstract teaching. It's not let us say, it's not only an object of meditation or cogitation, but that's only a small part of it. It's necessary, but it's a small part. That the real use of the Four Noble Truths is to attend wisely right here, right now. Is this suffering? Is this not suffering? What is it like to be free from suffering? And in fact, going to that third noble truth, which is exactly a skillful way of the very, very first thing that we do with the student. When the student sits down for the first time, the instruction is to watch the breath, to know the in breath, to know the out breath, to know the long breath, to know the short breath. And then the second thing that's said is, and if the mind wanders away, never mind, start again. All right. But the never mind, start again has that quality of generating goodwill, generating success, generating it from the perspective of not that you're a victim of the mind wandering away, but you're the champion who saw the mind wandering away. So in that regard, you can see that just seeing the mind wandering away and bringing it back is in a certain real way a small nibbana. So we can take that one breath and say, it's good to be free from all of that crap in the mind. And so this is one way of working with the third noble truth in the here now, of being able to bring yourself into a state of quiet happiness, where the mind is no longer burning. It's a very pleasurable state, by the way. You don't have to take my word for it. You know for sure it is.
Yeah.
And so this is the way of looking at this practice is that meditation or cogitation about a subject is much more the way that the Christianity had taught meditation at one time when they were doing it big time. But really what we're wanting to do within the Buddhist context is to do that evaluation based upon right here, right now, that this is suffering. This is the end of suffering. This is what it's like to be free from suffering. And this is the path in the sense of this is right view. This is right effort. This is right sati.
Mm-hmm.
This is right attitude. And so this is an important way of getting restarted with your practice, is to make that focus on the here now
Mm-hmm.
as you go through the because we've already discussed together most of the aspects of the Four Noble Truths.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the five aggregates, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the five aggregates, as you know, not self.
Yeah.
So when you recognize, when you can actually see consciousness, you can see it and see it that this is not me. You can see perceptions, and you can see those perceptions, which is the manufacturing of the object so that it can be recognized inside. And you can recognize that process of perception, not me.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the body. This body is not me. And we can experience that in the here now. It's not just a concept, it's an experience. This body is not me. These feelings are not mine. If these feelings were mine, I'd have a completely different set of feelings. So the feelings are not mine, and the body is not mine. Perception is not mine. Consciousness is not mine. My old memory systems, the Sankara, not me, not mine. And we can contemplate that. We can see it directly. When I say contemplate it, that means the meditation part. We can see it intellectually, but then we have to experience it directly in the here now.
Mm-hmm.
Once we do that, now we're beginning to understand um, the first three fetters: the eradication of doubt, eradication of the attachment that we have to the way things should be. The attachment of way things should be is rules.
Mm-hmm.
All the rites, rules, rituals, and everything is man's attempt to try to make the world the way they think it should be. And when we recognize it's more of our job to figure out what the world is like right now, then we start abandoning all of the rules. In fact, in that regard, here's something quite interesting about Wat Suan Mok that I remember from years ago. I'm not right sure what's happening there right now. But years ago, Achan Po would be generally the only resident of the temple that was a long-term permanent resident, would go to the chanting because he was the abbot. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and all of the monks that I knew, none of them were ever there. The only monks that I ever saw at chanting were monks that I didn't know, which meant that they were there temporary. They were not there as permanent residents of Wat Suan Mok. So what I'm actually pointing at is that because of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa not being really big on chanting, no one at Wat Suan Mok was particularly big on chanting.
Mm-hmm.
That ritual we don't see so much value in. And so as we recognize some, in other words, when we see the value in something, then our practice of that should increase. When we recognize that an activity such as chanting has only limited benefit, then we don't have so much value in it. Now, at one time, chanting was especially necessary because books themselves were just so hard to find, and listening to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's tapes and recordings was just not possible. And so, in the old days, to learn the sutras, chanting was necessary, even if there was printing. Even if the entire Tripitaka was at a temple, still there would be too many monks to be able to get much of the value out, and a lot of people didn't read anyway. And so chanting over the centuries has been really useful. But now, in modern times, it seems to have very limited value.
Mm-hmm.
Some say that it will get the mind ready for meditation. But why spend 20 minutes working a mind, making it tired? Because you can start out with a fresh mind and do the meditation without having to do the chanting first.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one example of many, many thousands of examples of when we see something has limited value, then we don't participate it much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's one of the early fetters. That's normally the second fetter. The first fetter, which is the big one, most important of all. And until we can cross that first fetter, no possibility of the second and the third fetters. Why? Because that first fetter is personality view. To recognize that I am not the body, I am not the feelings, I am not the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because all religions have been telling you that. They've been telling you got a soul.
Yeah.
And if you've got a soul, then you're under their control. You're under the church's control and you're under God's control and all of that. So they tell you you've got a soul. That's almost like giving you a ball and chain mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And so dropping that ball and chain is a good idea. That allows you to be not a slave to all of the things that you've been told. That's why Sila Bhatta Paramasa and personality view work hand in hand together. If I am not what they said I am, then the rules that they've laid down for me and the things that they've told me to do in order for me to be happy are not working because the things that they told me to do in order for me to be happy are false. Like taking Jesus as my savior. I've done that, been there, done that, doesn't work. Not only did it not work for me, but I've seen many hundreds and hundreds of people being baptized, and I've never seen it work. And so we begin to come out of our rites, rules, rituals, ceremonies, belief systems. As you were saying at one time, that you thought it was only about lighting candles and incense before sitting at meditation. But now you're recognizing, oh no, it's the entire society. That
Mm-hmm.
there is nothing in society that we can find that's going to eliminate suffering. That having no society at all, full chaos, full anarchy, that may cause a lot of suffering, but whatever solutions that humans have come up with in the form of society isn't adequate to the task.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that you've been told to do that'll make you happy don't work. You're going to have to figure out that you're going to have to do it yourself. And this is the way to do it. Whenever you catch yourself in suffering, you got to know it. Be here now with the suffering,
Mm-hmm.
because then you have a choice about it. Be here now with the bad feelings, because if we can see the feelings as they arise, then they're not going to run away into anger, ill will, bad feelings, etc. So that's my short version of the word meditation. The word meditation is not the same as just, let us say, going over a text in your mind after you've read the text and sitting on the floor and thinking about it. That's not the actual practice that we're looking for. The actual practice is to actually see the suffering, not to have concepts about what suffering is. We're not writing a dictionary about suffering. We're actually out investigating it, checking it, seeing it. Now, in fact, this should not be new to you. This should be a complete review.
Mm-hmm.
But this is why there's such a big difference between, let us say, the formal meditation that leads through various states of deep samadhi, or the jhana practices. That, but it's not the meditation that most people think in the sense of mulling over an object or thinking about or cogitating on an object, like the grace of God or why no meat on Friday or something silly. But rather, it's not. It's much more of an investigation,
Mm-hmm.
to investigate the Four Noble Truths, not to just think and cogitate and worry over them. So, welcome back to the practice.
Yeah, good to be back.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah. So, is it the case that at any level of practice, if you were to take a break for say a month from practice, most of the benefits that you had seen up to that point would go away?
That would be more true for a beginner.
Okay.
For an intermediate, two things will happen. One is that he will long to get back into practice. Or two, even if it's going to be a month where he has no practice, still he has an underlying foundation. Musicians who are away from music, who but were really good musicians, and then they get away from it, say for some reason or another they went to prison or whatever, and 3 4 years later they come back and pick it up again. They're pretty rusty when they start, but they come up to speed really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, and I can give you a lot of different examples about that. That this is a human condition. That the old programming that's been newly developed, but has been left fallow, needs to be dug down to. But the roots that you've laid down will still be there.
Yeah.
So an example that would be music. But I've got a very special example, and that is with Zen, especially an aspect of Zen that I don't think is known well in the West, but it's actually art in the sense of line drawings. Now, one of them that I know of very well is Emanuel Sherman, because a lot of his art that he did here in Thailand was done at Wat Suan Milk when he was here back in the 1960s. When he actually died right here on this island. But the story that I want to tell you is not about Emanuel Sherman right now. The story is about that there is, in this particular Zen, they teach the students how to make the brushes, how to make the ink, how to make the paper. I mean, they go right back to the basics. And then they do the line drawing, and they'll practice that for quite a number of years. And then the idea is that then the artist takes a break, a long break, perhaps a 10-year long break. So he spends 10 years learning the art, and then he spends 10 years not practicing the art. Because what they're actually going to be doing during that 10 years of fallow is that they're going to drop all the rights, rules, rituals, shoulds, haves, and right ways of doing things. And so the only thing that's left now after 10 years is the natural talent that was developed, the natural skill that was developed. And so now he comes back, and after a short period of time, now he's able to produce real art. the kind of art that he may never have produced if he had been practicing every day, day after day after day after day.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you got a really deep insight about how important it is to practice by not practicing.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that advantage, there is that benefit that is known and practiced within Zen and the art of art, I guess, as
Yeah.
opposed to Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance or Zen and the art of archery, or my favorite, Zen and the art of donuts, which would mean that when you're shooting donuts, you do not care about where they land. You're
Yeah.
only interested, are you shooting them correctly? You might that's actually a way of talking about generosity, which you and I have talked about just a little bit, but not much. And so I've got several students who are practicing now generosity as a skill to be developed,
Mm-hmm.
and that Willie is doing that. Uh, Gosh, I've got several students right now practicing this, so I'm going to introduce it to you also. Um, in the sense of um, finding ways to give little things, like at work. I imagine that you work with people, so someday you just show up with donuts.
Mm-hmm.
Offer the donuts to each person, but you do not worry about whether they take a donut or not. Your job is to offer donuts.
Uh-huh.
All right. So, in any case, we'll talk about this more in detail. But you can try it one time just to see what it's like. Willie, in fact, we started with donuts with him because he was in a new job. And so
Mm-hmm.
this was to help Willie break the ice for him to feel like that he belonged there.
Mm-hmm.
You already had this same job for quite a while, so you're not working from the same perspective as Willie was. But you will find great benefit
Mm-hmm.
in the practice of generosity. So this is one of the ways of doing it at work, or taking quarters with you when you're out on the street. What city do you live in?
Atlanta.
At Atlanta. That's right. Are there a lot of homeless in Atlanta that you see?
Yeah.
All right. So there's a place for some quarters. Start being generous with the homeless. Start smiling at them,
Mm-hmm.
making contact. Whenever you see somebody, in fact, you'll start seeing the same people over and over again.
Yeah.
Willie says that right now there's not a lot of homeless on the streets in New York, but that's because it's so cold. I don't know how cold it is in Atlanta right now.
It's warmed up a lot in the last few weeks.
Oh, good, good, good. All right, so you got any other questions?
Um, hmm. Not particularly. Just yeah, getting back on the horse.
All right, get a foot in the saddle, or
Yeah.
get a foot in the stirrup, and as you're swinging your legs over, I'm gonna beat that horse in the butt. Let's gallop on. Let's boogie on down the road. All right, well, good. I'm glad to hear that you're getting back into it and getting your groove again. And
Yeah.
so, give me another call, and we'll go a little deeper in the Dhamma.
Sounds good.
Excellent. All right, Dan. See you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.